Okay, so are you ready to dive in? Because today we're tackling the future of blockchain.
Always down for a good blockchain deep dive.
But we're not even going to talk about the next Bitcoin or any of that hype stuff.
Even better.
We're going way deeper into the nitty-gritty, like the actual machinery that makes this whole thing tick.
Stuff under the hood that nobody talks about, but
Yeah.
it's actually super important.
Exactly. And this article you sent over is perfect. It's all about blockchain transactions, but specifically what happens between them.
The behind-the-scenes action.
Yeah.
Stuff most people don't even realize is going on.
And the article kicks off with this new platform called Khalani, and they basically want to be the ultimate blockchain traffic controller.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
Yeah.
Traffic controller. How did that even work with blockchain?
Well, they use this analogy, and it's actually pretty brilliant. They compare the whole blockchain ecosystem to global logistics and supply chains.
Oh, okay, I'm starting to see it, because at the end of the day, we're talking about moving things from one place to another. Just in this case, it's data and value instead of physical goods.
Exactly. And the article keeps mentioning these terms, relayers and solvers. Have you heard of these before?
I have, actually. They're like the unsung heroes of the blockchain world.
Okay, so break it down for me. What do these relayers and solvers actually do?
So relayers, think of them like the postal service of the blockchain world.
Mm.
They're the ones making sure your data packets or messages get delivered to the right blockchain address, even if those blockchains are totally different.
So if I'm sending a little crypto care package from, say, Ethereum land to Solana City, the relayer makes sure it gets there safe and sound.
Exactly. Even though they have totally different customs and regulations.
Okay, I'm with you. Now, what about these solvers? What makes them so special?
All right, so solvers are on a whole other level. If relayers or the postal service solvers are like the skilled craftspeople or even factories in this analogy.
Okay, getting kind of abstract here.
Basically, they take your request, what the article calls intents, and they figure out how to actually execute them.
So give me an example.
Sure. Let's say you're on a decentralized exchange, and you're trying to swap some tokens for the best price possible. The solver is the one working behind the scenes, finding you that sweet spot and making that trade happen.
Wow, so they're like the deal makers, the behind-the-scenes negotiators.
Exactly. They're doing all the heavy lifting, making it look easy for us regular users.
Man, I had no idea there was so much going on behind the scenes. But it kind of sounds like it's a little bit of a free-for-all out there. Like the article even uses the word fragmented to describe the current system for relayers and solvers, and that doesn't sound great.
Yeah, it's not ideal. It's a bit like if every online store had to build their own delivery network from scratch instead of just using existing systems.
Oh, wow. So instead of one big efficient system, we have a bunch of little ones all trying to figure things out on their own.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And that creates a ton of problems.
Yeah, like what?
Well, for starters, it makes things super complicated and expensive for developers. They're constantly reinventing the wheel instead of building on top of what already exists.
Right, so it stifles innovation.
Exactly. And it's not great for interoperability either, which is like the holy grail everyone's after.
Because if everyone's building their own systems, nothing can really talk to each other, right?
Exactly. It's like trying to build a global economy where every country has its own currency and no one can agree on exchange rates. It just doesn't work.
Okay, so we've got this fragmented system leading to all sorts of problems. That's where Khalani struts in, right? They want to be the hero, the ultimate problem solver.
That's the pitch. They want to bring some order to the chaos.
And how are they planning on doing that?
Their big idea is to create a unified coordination system for the entire blockchain ecosystem. Think of it like a global logistics hub, a central point where all these different networks can seamlessly connect and interact.
So they're basically saying, hey, everyone, stop building your own messy delivery routes and just use our super efficient system instead.
That's the gist, yeah.
So it's like Kalani's building this grand central station for blockchain.
Exactly. And here's where it gets even cooler. They're not just trying to replace everything. They actually emphasize the importance of what they call last mile integration.
Okay, now you're speaking my language. I love a good analogy. Break it down for me.
So imagine you have a global delivery giant like FedEx.
Mm-hmm.
They can get your package across the world,
Yeah.
but you still need those local delivery drivers who know every nook and cranny of their neighborhoods to get it to your doorstep.
Okay, so in the blockchain world, who are those local delivery drivers? Who make sure things run smoothly at that more granular level?
That's where these specialized providers come in, and they can actually plug directly into Khalani's platform. They're the ones that handle those hyper-specific tasks that need a more nuanced touch.
So give me an example. What kind of specialized tasks are we talking about here?
Sure. So maybe you have a provider that's really good at moving certain types of assets between like a particular pair of blockchains.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe they're built to handle a specific type of complex transaction that requires a lot of back and forth.
So it's like they're the niche experts, the ones who really know the ins and outs of a specific area.
Exactly. And here's the really cool part. Because this is blockchain, Kalani's vision is totally open and extensible. Anyone can build and connect their own last-mile solution.
So it's like they're building the highway, but they're encouraging everyone to design their own awesome cars and trucks to drive on it.
Exactly. They want to create a whole ecosystem, not just a platform.
I love that. So instead of one company trying to do everything, you have this whole network of specialists all contributing their expertise.
And for users like you and me, that means more options, better services, and potentially even lower costs down the road.
Okay, so this is all sounding pretty amazing so far, but this is where I have to ask, what's the catch?
Well, you're right to be cautious. The article does highlight a few potential downsides.
Like what?
The big one, especially in the blockchain space, is the question of centralization.
Right, because isn't the whole point of blockchain to move away from centralized systems?
Exactly, and that's the tension. Even if Kalani's intentions are good, if they become the central hub for everything, it could create a single point of failure.
Right, it's like putting all your eggs in one basket.
Exactly. And then there's the question of adaptability. Can Kalani keep up with the insane pace of innovation in the crypto world?
Because this industry moves at warp speed.
It really does. And it's like trying to design an airport for flying cars when we haven't even perfected flying cars yet.
It's such a good point, so they have to be pretty nimble to stay ahead of the curve.
Exactly. They have to be able to adapt to whatever crazy innovations pop up next.
It's a lot to think about. This whole conversation just makes me realize how much potential this technology has, but also how much uncertainty there still is.
It's a wild ride for sure.
But that's what makes it so interesting, right?
Absolutely. There's never a dull moment in the world of blockchain, that's for sure.
So to bring it back to Kalani, what does this all mean for their vision?
Well, it highlights this fundamental tension in the blockchain world. The balance between decentralization and the need for efficiency.
We want it to be open and free, but we also want it to be fast and easy to use.
Exactly. It's a tough needle to thread.
It reminds me of finding that sweet spot between a free market and regulation, too little regulation, and you have chaos, too much, and you stifle growth.
That's a great analogy. And it's something we're seeing play out in real time in the blockchain space, especially when you start talking about things like transaction speeds, costs, and ultimately that user experience.
Because what good is all this amazing tech if it's too complicated or expensive for everyday people to actually use?
Exactly.
Yeah.
We need to make sure it actually benefits people, not just the developers building it.
It's like any new technology. It has to be accessible and user-friendly to really take off.
Exactly. And that's where this whole conversation about relayers and solvers comes in. They're the ones working behind the scenes to make all of that happen.
The unsung heroes making sure our transactions go through without a hitch.
And this article is so important because it reminds us to look beyond the surface, to appreciate the full life cycle of a blockchain transaction.
Not just the part we see as users.
Exactly. It's like the difference between enjoying a delicious meal and understanding the entire journey from farm to table.
Okay, I love that analogy. So we've got these relayers moving the data around. We've got these solvers putting the puzzle pieces together. But for someone like me who's still wrapping their head around all this, can you give me like a real-world example? What does this actually look like in action?
Sure. Let's say you're using one of those decentralized lending platforms, where you can lend out your crypto and earn interest on it.
Okay, got it. Decentralized finance, I'm following.
So let's say you've lent out your crypto and now you want to withdraw some of it.
Okay, makes sense.
So you go on the platform, you click withdraw, but what you don't see is that behind the scenes, that request is being sent out as an intent into the blockchain ether.
And that, my friend, is where the solvers come in and work their magic.
Exactly. A solver network receives your intent and gets to work. They might need to interact with multiple different blockchains to locate your assets, calculate how much interest you've earned, and then execute the necessary transfers to put those assets back into your digital wallet.
So there could be multiple solvers involved, each with their own specialty, all working together to make this one transaction happen.
Precisely. One solver might specialize in tracking interest payments, while another one's whole thing is cross-chain transfers.
It's like a relay race.
No.
But instead of a baton, they're passing my transaction from one to the other until it reaches the finish line.
I love that analogy. And all of this is happening behind the scenes without you having to lift a finger.
So it's like magic, but it's not magic. It's blockchain.
Exactly. It's like blockchain sorcery.
I like that. Okay, so to wrap our heads around this whole thing, Khalani wants to make blockchain transactions as easy as sending an email.
That's the goal. They
Mm.
want to make all this complex stuff invisible to the user.
And they want to do that with this whole last mile integration idea, which, by the way, this article has another analogy to explain it. Are you ready for this?
Hit me with it.
Okay, so this time they're comparing it to the concepts of a functional core and an imperative shell in software architecture.
Okay, I'm intrigued. That's a new one. It sounds a little more technical, though.
Yeah, it definitely goes a bit deeper into the weeds, but I
Oh.
think I'm starting to get it.
Okay, so let's break it down. What's this functional core all about?
So imagine a castle, right? The functional core is like the foundation and the strong central keep, the most important parts, heavily fortified, built to last.
The bedrock, the heart of the operation.
Exactly. And it's designed to be super stable and secure. It doesn't really change even as the world outside evolves.
Okay, makes sense. So if the functional core is the castle keep, what's the imperative shell?
Well, the imperative shell includes all the other stuff, like the outer walls, the drawbridge, maybe even a moat.
Okay, see where you're going with this.
These parts are still super important for defense, but they're also more adaptable.
So you might add towers or extend the walls or even change the drawbridge mechanism over time, depending on what's happening in the world around you.
That's exactly it.
Yeah.
So how does this all tie back to blockchain? What's Kalani's angle here?
So Khalani sees itself as the functional core of the blockchain ecosystem.
They want to be that really strong foundation that everything else can be built on,
Exactly. But they also know that they can't be everything to everyone.
which is where the imperative shell comes in.
Exactly. That's where all those specialized last-mile integrators we talked about come into play.
So those integrators are like the different towers and fortifications, each one serving its own unique purpose.
Exactly. They can plug directly into Kalani's core infrastructure and offer more specialized services.
So what does that look like in practice? Give me some examples.
Sure. Think about things like handling super complex transactions, or connecting very specific blockchains, or even incorporating things like AI or real-world data into the mix.
Stuff that's beyond Kalani's core competencies, but still really important.
Right? It's about creating a system that's both incredibly strong and incredibly flexible at the same time.
Just like a well-designed castle can withstand anything.
Exactly. And this kind of modular architecture. It's not a new idea in software development,
Hmm?
but it's really interesting to see how Kalani is applying it to the world of blockchain.
It really shows how much thought is going into building these systems. It's not just about writing code. It's about designing something that can adapt and grow and solve real-world problems.
And that's what makes this whole space so fascinating to follow. We're literally witnessing the birth of entirely new systems, completely new ways of interacting with technology and with each other.
It's like being back in the early days of the internet. But this time, we have a front row seat to the revolution.
And it's not just about the tech. It's about what this tech could potentially do. It could transform entire industries, reshape our economy. It could even change how we think about things like trust and value.
It's mind-blowing when you really think about it.
It really is. But as you continue to explore blockchain, keep these questions in mind. Centralization, adaptability, user experience. These are the big ones.
Because finding that balance between a strong foundation and the flexibility to adapt, that's going to be key to making all of this work.
Exactly. It's going to be an interesting ride, that's for sure.
Well, on that note, I think it's time for us to wrap up this deep dive. But before we go, I want to give a shout out to all those relayers and solvers out there.
The unsung heroes working tirelessly behind the scenes to make all of this happen.
Because without them, none of this would be possible. So the next time you have a smooth, instant transaction online, take a second to appreciate the magic that's happening behind the scenes.
It's pretty incredible when you think about it.
It is. All right, everyone, until next time, happy diving.